Hey, very good. Lots going on. I whet my appetite to kind of see all the information you gained and trying to get more information that you can make better decisions, particularly some aha moments, it sounds like already, and how things are interrelated, that you can't look at them independently, as some consequences on sustainability and health and overall function. I'm looking down to our question moderators. Do you have any to go with, or should we take some from the crowd? Or tell me, Eric.
We have some here. We'll combine some. If there's any from the crowd, we can grab real quick. We have about 5 minutes for questions, so they luck out in that regard, judging by some of these questions. But
they're so hard that they lucked out, huh?
Yeah, I'll start with one. Don, you mentioned getting feedback for all the CDC website and for those types of activities. Is there a pathway for that, or how would you go about getting you feedback for those, like infographics and websites?
That's a good question. We need to figure that out. So I'm trying to think. I think one thing that we will do is once these reports, the threats report comes out, we can put it through Katie and you, Eric, and have it go out to the group. And so if the group wants to write back, then I think probably just give my email then, and we can just aggregate all of the feedback or input if people have. I'm hoping that there's feedback. I'm not sure how much or what kind it would be. We don't have an open box that we can take right now. So we can think about that. If there's and actually our group has talked about it. So let me take that back to our group. And if we release the threats report and want that feedback, perhaps we can create a specific link and we will get that out with the threats report so that people can give that feedback. So let me work on that.
Sounds great. Dr. Flynn, the Appendix A and WHO drug list are being used in voluntary meat labels. Will revision include a carve-out for drugs designated for use in food animals? So the Appendix A and WHO drug lists are being used in voluntary meat labels. Will revision include a carve-out for drugs designated for use in food animals? And if there's anyone wants to clarify the question, that was...
So you're looking for non-medically important? Are they going to be separated out? Is that the question?
Yeah, I guess so. Come on. Yeah, I guess I'm not completely clear. I mean, I understand that the significance to the Appendix A list is broad in the sense that it was originally designed to, again, support this assessment process that FDA does, but it obviously has taken on much broader meaning in terms of defining what drugs are considered medically important or not. The concept of medically, we're sticking by the idea that we feel certain drugs are medically important and we should designate ones that are medically important as those where we should focus our effort because of the heightened risk. I think if this answers the question somewhat, I think the framework would still potentially lead to an outcome where there's certain drugs that would not meet the criteria to be medically important, and so therefore we would not consider them medically important. Right now, we currently have some drugs that are medically important, drugs that don't appear on this Appendix A list. Biggest example, ionophores, are not considered medically important because we don't feel that, one, they're not used in human medicine. We don't feel there's, any substantial data indicating that that class of drugs contributes to AMR of public health concern.
So, Dr. Cook, where's your funding coming from, and how do you set priorities on what you're going to do that way?
Thank you. We don't have the kind of funding CDC has. And so we're a lean organization. We really have to do the most with what we have. It has helped us that AMR is a priority topic. We basically, and so I'm in the food safety national program, and what we do is we go around and talk to stakeholders, and so that's regulatory agencies, that's industry groups, farmers, and we find out what their priorities are and where we have the knowledge gaps. And so we then set what those priorities are, and then the scientists who are the experts and truly have the knowledge in these areas will go back and write up their plans. So I should say the way that it gets divided out are, is this a priority in agriculture? And AMR, of course, is. And then what are the most important topics that we should focus on? Alternatives is huge right now.
Yeah, Heather.
Hi, everyone. I'm Heather Fowler, National Pork Board. My question is for you, Dr. Flynn, especially since this whole symposium is framed around communicating antimicrobial resistance. So I wanted you to comment on the terminology medically important, and then your thought on, will we ever move away from that? Will we just say human importance or something like that? Because I know there was a report out some years back from FAO, OIE, and WHO got together, and they looked at of importance in veterinary medicine, of importance in human medicine. As someone that has to develop content and communicate to my producers about medically important, well, what do they mean by that? Well, that's for humans. Well, aren't they important for us as well? So just a comment on, do you think we'll ever move away from that terminology? Will it change and shift so it's clear exactly what we're talking about? And how do we frame it from a veterinary perspective, what's important for us as well?
Yeah, I'm not sure I have a clear, I think that's been a challenge for us ongoing. I mean, it kind of cuts in both directions. On one hand, we want to act in a risk-based manner, so we don't want to necessarily just throw a broad umbrella and say we want, we need to take actions related to anything that has antimicrobial activity. And so that's not hitting the right note. And so, again, from a risk perspective, we sort of coined the term medically important for better or worse. It now has sort of taken on a life of its own. It's gotten sort of co-opted or adopted by a variety of different sectors. It's now language that's gotten adopted in the international arena. I think on one hand that's good because some of our international partners, it means they're also looking at it from a risk perspective and with understanding that they don't treat everything the same. But it's also being picked up by the food industry and by others by saying, hey, we're going to put in place certain purchasing standard for medically important antibiotics. I think the other problem that it has created is that even when you look at medically important antimicrobials, they're not all created the same, right? And I think that's what really has gotten lost, and I think that's a big problem because the bulk of all the products that we're using are medically important. I mean, the challenge is that most of the key antibiotics that we're using are shared. They're used by humans and animals. What we've tried to do with the ranking list is to create a gradient, that there's a ranking list. There's some that are really critically important on one end of the spectrum, and there's others that are on the low end. We care a lot more about these critically important antibiotics than we do about the ones on the low end, and probably will restrict ones more than the other. The challenge with using this term medically important is they've all got lumped together. And we just generically talk about medically important as though they're all one big lump, when in fact there's a variety of drugs within there. I think that's another communication issue, where we've lost that granularity. And I think that's, as we're going forward with this update to the appendix, I think that's an issue that we're trying to focus on is how can we shift the narrative on this a little bit to make it clearer. Certainly interested in anybody's input if anyone has any ideas about how to do that, but that's certainly something that we're focused on.
So I think we want to thank our panel for their great job today. Some good information.